You're the only one who can defeat it.
The Marvel Cinematic Universe makes me feel like Peter Parker at times. I mean, I enjoy the thrills and the joys of some of the finest superhero movies ever made, and then come the dark times with some abysmal entrance. But much like Peter Parker, there's always light at the end of the tunnel, and this really seems like the perfect year to be a Marvel thing. Spider-Man Brand New Day is easily one of the best MCU movies of all time, and it's certainly the best Spider-Man flick featuring Tom Holland. Such is the emotional depth and action-packed storytelling. I think the best part of the movie is the way it highlights what it means to be Spider-Man, which is something Toby Maguire's Spider-Man movies did so well. In this video, I'll break down the film for you and elaborate on the implications of the eventful climax. There will be some major spoilers for Spider-Man Brand New Day, so you've been warned.
I have something to tell you that's gonna sound crazy, but it's the truth.
The friendly neighborhood superhero and his solitude. I'm sure you remember the events of Spider-Man No Way Home when Dr. Strange cast his spell to repair the broken multiverse. While it fixed the crisis at hand, and it was so superhero-like for Spider-Man to go ahead with it, his life became pretty difficult in the aftermath. The memory of Peter Parker was wiped from everyone's mind, including his closest people like his girlfriend MJ and his best friend Ned. And with Aunt May already dead, Peter has nobody left in his life. Since then, it's been a painfully isolated life, and this is where the movie picks up in Brand New Day. However, if one learns to live with solitude, it doesn't mean that they enjoy the broken life. Yeah, it's safer that way, because I think if Peter has to witness one more of his close people dying, he'd probably lose it. But as of now, Peter Parker is a nobody, and he keeps himself busy with what he does best. To be the superhero vigilante who works alongside the police and the Department of Damage Control to keep threats at bay. To be fair, this is the only thing that's going well for him, because this is a city that loves Spider-Man. It's gotta be better than the times when we've all seen the negative propaganda against Spider-Man and how the media framed him as a villain. So here he is, getting better by the day at being Spider-Man. His tech-filled apartment setup surely helps, and his advanced AI assistant helps him with just about everything. This is the only company he keeps, and he works with the cops. It's another noticeable improvement because Spider-Man is often hunted by the cops and is always on the run. Here, Gene DeWolf, a detective with the New York Police Department, reminds me of how Commissioner Gordon always approved of Batman's methods to fight crime. He does well to deal with some B-grade villains such as the Ninja Clan The Hand, the Crime Lord Tombstone, and the Scorpion. However, it all changes with an attack that's directed at the Department of Damage Control, and it's definitely out of the ordinary. I love the early fight sequences where you also get to see the Punisher in action, and John Barenthal's just brilliant in the role. Despite all his efforts, Spider-Man's unable to stop a raging armored vehicle from crashing into the Department of Damage Control, and he realizes the gravity of the situation when he sees a powerful psychic at work who could take control of people's minds effortlessly and jump from one body to another. This attack is no more than a warning, but Peter knows that this is a ticking time bomb. I appreciate the effort to ensure absolute secrecy about the identity of the mysterious villain, but I think we all knew that it's none other than Jean Grey, and we weren't wrong.
I am totally out of control. I gotta fix whatever this is right now.
The physical changes in Peter. The crisis worsens when Peter notices certain physical changes in himself. It's basically an evolution of his powers, triggered by an increased secretion of hormones that support the arachnid part of his gene. This is caused by extreme emotional moments and tension, and our protagonist has to deal with plenty of both. You see, he spots Ned rather accidentally, and even though he doesn't just walk up to him for a conversation, he still follows him home. Ned is now a roommate of MJ who also happens to have a boyfriend. Peter turns up as the awkward guest at their housewarming party. Now, Tom Holland really steals the show here, as he does his best to mask the pain of anonymity, even as his closest people stand right next to him as strangers. He has to watch MJ kiss her boyfriend, which triggers his physical change further. He has a crushing headache accompanied by extremely heightened senses and increased strength. He also develops organic webbing, something that he doesn't immediately learn to control. I love how the movie captures his physical changes affecting his psyche. He's alone and clueless, and you see him helplessly crashing into the ground as the changes overwhelm him. When he regains consciousness, he finds himself covered in a cocoon of spiderwebbing, and he's unable to exercise any control over this. His AI assistant tells him what's wrong, but he needs a fix, and he needs it fast because Jean Grey is now after it. I guess she's realized that he's the force to be reckoned with if she's to take down the Department of Damage Control, and why she wants to do so, that's what this story's all about. As of now, the head of the organization, Bill Metzger, is happy with Spider-Man's work, and he wants the mysterious enemy to be taken down as soon as possible.
Excuse me, Dr. Banner. I need your help.
What did you say your name was?
The Bruce Banner encounter and the inhibitors. A clueless Peter Parker goes to the person who knows a thing or two about controlling dangerous physical changes. Dr. Bruce Banner is now a calm and composed physics professor, even though his students don't miss an opportunity to remind him of the Hulk. In order to contain his transformation into the Hulk, Dr. Banner has developed a special inhibitor that prevents him from undergoing such a change. Peter slyly wants to know if a similar inhibitor would work in a situation like his, and Dr. Banner's optimistic. This encounter also gives Peter something to think about when Banner asks him how he'll identify which changes are bad and should be suppressed. I guess this is the first major hint that the key to Spider-Man succeeding this tricky phase is to embrace himself for who he is, including his physical transformation. Dark Spider-Man. Tom Holland's Spider-Man has been anything but dark, but in this movie, you get the closest to someone who has little to no control over himself. Of course, this happens during his uncomfortable transformation, and he's barely gotten the hang of his organic webbing. Scorpion, who was freed earlier, is mind-controlled by Jean Grey, and after receiving news of his attack, Spider-Man heads out to fight him, totally unprepared. I mean, at this point, he can barely get his swinging through the buildings right, let alone fighting effectively. Nevertheless, it turns out to be one hell of a fight. And after his initial struggles, Spider-Man's cornered, and this is when the arachnid hormone does the trick and takes over. He's suddenly freakishly strong and quick. But what makes him dangerous is that he has no control over his actions. He hands quite a thrashing to Scorpion, but in the process, he also damages a police car and leaves a cop seriously injured. It's a good thing that Jean DeWolf is there to contain the situation, and she's compassionate enough to send Peter home to take care of himself. Her character almost reminds me of Aunt May at times because she's the only one who has some genuine affection and care for Spider-Man. Nevertheless, Peter has a lot to figure out, and he has to get it done fast enough because Jean Grey is proving to be more than a handful. Jean Grey knows Peter Parker is Spider-Man. One thing that's been working to Spider-Man's advantage so far is that Jean Grey is unable to take over his mind like she can so effortlessly do to others. But with his physical transformation in process, Peter can no longer detect her presence among other individuals. Things take a dangerous turn when it's revealed that Jean Grey knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. She uses random people on the street to convey this information, and she also knows about his soft spot for MJ. This means that she has her finger on Peter's most vulnerable spot, and suddenly it becomes a lot more than just fighting a powerful villain. It's also a fight to save the ones he loves the most, because his solitary life would be meaningless if it's still endangered them. One of my favorite action scenes in the movie is the one where Jean Grey's on the run, teasing Spider-Man just enough as he goes after her. She jumps from one body to another, and finally takes over a helicopter pilot. However, by now, Peter's advanced AI system, this really an upgraded Friday who assisted Iron Man back in the day, has analyzed her jumping pattern. It turns out that she can mind jump only within a certain radius, and Spider-Man keeps her webbed up in the air as she's in the mind of the helicopter pilot. Of course, it's no more than a temporary fix, and Peter has to figure out a more concrete arrangement to deal with her. Jean Grey hits where it hurts most. After leaving Jean Grey trapped in the mind of the helicopter pilot, Spider-Man rushes to MJ because he knows it wouldn't be long before Jean Grey finds a way to break free. The earlier interaction between Peter and MJ was at an awkward housewarming party, and this time he's in his suit as Spider-Man. As you can imagine, it's pretty weird for MJ when Spider-Man asks her to come along because her life is in danger. But somehow she agrees. He swings her through buildings, and then something happens that's like salt on a fresh wound. There's a moment of hope, where it seems like MJ remembers her past with Peter. They even share an adorable kiss, but it's soon interrupted by a revelation that shocks Peter. It turns out that Jean Grey has mind-controlled MJ now, and she makes her jump from a building, only for a desperate Spider-Man to barely save her. So this is when Spider-Man gets the first facial scan of Jean Grey. By the time MJ's back to being herself, she remembers nothing at all, and Spider-Man decides to take her to a safe hiding place. They head to the Punisher's lair, which is expectedly booby-trapped, and the foul-mouthed anti-hero doesn't really understand politeness. Nevertheless, I love the chemistry between the Punisher and Spider-Man because somewhere, Punisher is grateful as Spider-Man saved his life once. However, he isn't particularly keen on babysitting his girlfriend, even though he reluctantly agrees. Yelena Belova has a fun cameo. It might not be much, but I didn't mind the supporting role of Yelena Belova as the new Black Widow. Her first meeting with Spider-Man when he goes to her for some information, and it's a hilarious meeting, where she forces him to join her in the pool. This is her office apparently, but she turns out to be rather useful which she later reveals the mysterious psychic to be Jean Grey. Finally, a tool to counter Jean Grey. In this movie, you'll see Spider-Man dealing with the twin threat of fighting his own physical changes and one of the most powerful mutants. However, he's also supported by a very capable AI system, and he's no dummy himself. He comes up with a solution that can take care of both, even though it requires some inputs for MJ to perfect the tool. He develops a suppressor chip that initially doesn't work well when he uses it on himself. During his brief stay at the Punisher's place, it's MJ who points out that he didn't calculate for the material around his eyes in the suit. The correction's all it takes to perfect the chip, and now Peter intends to use a special chip for Jean Grey to suppress her psychic powers as well. Of course, things are easier said than done. Jean's already attacked the Department of Damage Control headquarters, and she's unleashed a weapon that nobody was prepared for. The Savage Hulk and the epic battle. As Spider-Man rushes out to save the day, he comes across a threat he definitely did not anticipate. Back at the DODC headquarters, Bill Metzger and a few others have taken shelter in a heavily fortified room, but something insanely powerful is banging on the door and seems to nearly break it down. Spider-Man quickly discovers that this is none other than the mighty Hulk, only this one's far more dangerous than the one we've known. Savage Hulk is taller and stronger, and he has no inhibitions as he goes after Spider-Man, not holding back his punches. Of course, this is the work of Jean Grey, who's found the perfect tool to break into the DODC and keep Spider-Man busy while she gets the job done. As for Spider-Man, he takes the thrashing of his life, and even though he pulls off a few smart moves, they simply aren't enough to tackle the mighty Hulk. We even see Dr. Banner struggling momentarily to gain his composure, but Spider-Man fails to attach the suppressor to him, and he turns back into the Hulk. The Punisher comes to his aid, but he's not very useful once Jean Grey takes over his mind and leads him to attack Bill and his guards. Finally, when Spider-Man is pinned down and the Hulk is set for a killing blow, something remarkable happens. In his desperation, Spider-Man tries to remind him that he's Peter and not his enemy, and somehow the Hulk seems to remember. He stops his attack and crashes down to the ground, where Dr. Banner is later rescued by the cops. Jean Grey's finally contained, but is it the wrong villain? I always knew that Jean Grey wouldn't be the villain of the story, and it soon is proven right. After an intense encounter, Spider-Man finally gets his suppressor on her, preventing her powers. She's taken in by the DODC, and Bill takes over from here, thanking Spider-Man for all his support. Meanwhile, Spider-Man heads back to MJ, who's found the letter that Peter had written to her, and he has some explaining to do. As much as he confesses his love for her, MJ reveals that she has no memory of their time together and doesn't feel the same way. At least she now knows that they had a history that's been wiped clean from her memory. The encounter with Ned is also heartening to see, even though Peter meets him as Spider-Man. It just so happens that Ned is obsessed with Spider-Man and his secret identity, but Peter refrains from telling him. However, there is one final twist as it finally occurs to him that Jean Grey has been talking about someone named Sarah, and he realizes that Bill lied to him all along about not knowing anything about her. Once again, the Black Widow's information helps him out, and he finds out that the DODC wiped out all records of Jean Grey. Spider-Man finally understands that he had it wrong all along, and he rushes to the rescue of Jean Grey. Jean Grey shows her true powers, the best climax you could hope for. Much of the movie's been spent exploring the powers of Jean Grey, but it's revealed at the end that she wasn't even at her full potential. After she's restrained, the true face of Bill is revealed. It turns out that Sarah was her sister, and the DODC kidnapped her to experiment on her powers. Now they plan on doing the same with Jean Grey in order to harness her powers, but their sinister plan doesn't work for long. When Jean finds out that her sister's been killed in the process, her fury unleashes her true potential. The psychic blast freezes everyone within a certain radius, and by the time Spider-Man reaches the facility, she no longer needs his help. Peter tries to reason with her, but she's hell-bent on revenge and sends the Hand after her. It's one of the most beautifully choreographed fight scenes that I've ever seen as Spider-Man takes on the Ninja Clan. Eventually, it requires something truly dramatic from Peter to bring her back to her senses. He allows her into his mind, and here she experiences a tender moment with Aunt May, who offers her valuable inputs on how to handle superpowers of this magnitude. However, on the other hand, Punisher is completely unaware that the situation's handled. He takes up a position on a distant building and uses his sniper rifle to fire a shot at Jean. Spider-Man saves her just in time, but he's shot and seriously injured himself. A devastated Frank Castle takes him to the hospital where he recovers, and Jean Grey is free to go as the real villain is revealed. It's also a moment for Spider-Man to see how much the city loves him, as people gather in front of the hospital wishing him a speedy recovery. Jean leaves on a city bus, and I wonder if the journey will take her to the X-Men in this universe. I sure expect to see her in Avengers Doomsday. As for Peter, he meets Ned, and when they shake hands, it becomes their signature handshake that we know all too well. It seems as though Ned recognizes him as a familiar smile flashes on his face. I'm also intrigued by this scene where MJ can be seen on the rooftop holding a necklace that she shouldn't remember ever having received from Peter. Are they slowly regaining their memories of him? Maybe it's too soon to tell, because it can also be that Ned just realizes that Peter is Spider-Man and smiles for that reason. And MJ is just thinking about her brief tryst with Peter and their apparent history together that she can no longer remember. Is there a post-credit scene? What are the implications? We all know that Avengers Doomsday is due soon, and I expected a more meaningful post-credit scene than the one we got here. After the credits, you can see an image of Ned's Spider Tracker app that he created to track Spider-Man's movements. It pops up with a notification of a new Spider-Man sighting, and soon the app begins to glitch, and the location of the sighting moves up into the sky into outer space. This could be an interesting insight into where Spider-Man's headed next, and I'll create a video on what this might mean for Spider-Man in Avengers Doomsday, so stay tuned to our channel. Overall, this film's easily among the finest from the MCU, and I loved everything from the acting performances to the engaging storyline. Jean Grey was used perfectly, and the ending does justice to her true power. Like I said before, the movie really captures what it means to be Spider-Man. And while his personal struggles are far from over, he might be looking at better days ahead of him, with a glimmer of hope of a potential reunion with MJ. I strongly recommend checking this out in the theaters, and let me know in the comments below what you think of the movie. If you like this video, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, and click that notification bell so when we get some more news about your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, we'll swing into town with a brand new video. Stay safe, have a great day, and as always, stay marvelous.